Okay, it's 8:30. So call this what's that?
I'll just ask Mikey for okay.
So call this zoning committee meeting to order. Could we have a roll call, please?
Jesse Betcher,
Here.
Ron Buckholz,
Here.
Tweed Schuman, Stacy Hessel, Michael Maestri, John Righeimer.
Okay, we have three people, which is a quorum, and I understand that Mr. Schuman should be here within a minute or two. Can't shut the door. Don't leave that open.
Yeah.
Here comes.
Good morning.
Okay, let the record show that Mr. Schuman is now in attendance. We have four, and please rise for the pledge of allegiance. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You want to half done it, please, Doug? That'll work. Yeah, maybe.
Okay, the statement of committee hearing procedure and statement of hearing notice is included. Directions for individuals wishing to speak at the public hearing to be conducted at the zoning committee meeting are available at the front of this room next to the agenda for today's meeting. Statement of committee and hearing procedure document is hereby incorporated into the record for this committee meeting. Any public hearing conducted at today's meeting has been published as a class 2 notice in accordance with chapter 985 of the Wisconsin statutes in the Sawyer County Record and Sawyer County Gazette and posted. Entertain a motion for approval of last month's minutes. We have a motion by Mr. Buckholz for approval, second by Ms. Hessel. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, public comment. Please note, comment time is intended for general public comments, not comments relating to a specific application before this committee. Each agenda item requiring a public hearing will have its public hearing conducted just prior to the application being considered by this committee. If you wish to speak on a specific agenda item, we encourage you to hold your comments until then. We have one.
Two. First I have is Linda Zilmer for public comment.
Please say your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes.
Linda Zolmer, 902 Holly Hill Lane, Birchwood, Edgewater property owner. My public comment today has to do with the process of moving forward this proposed ordinance amendment for multi-dwelling. It also includes resorts. Before the meeting officially started, one of the other people here in attendance was addressing the official class 2 notice that appeared for 2 weeks in the Sawyer County Record versus this agenda, which was only first posted to the county website a week ago. This is the second time that this proposed ordinance, which is a matter of wide public interest and also is the subject of, or there's a circumstance, the subject of this amendment is in court right now. This is the second time where it has not shown up on the class 2 notice, but it has shown up on an agenda. And I did ask the zoning administrator about this, and he said that outside legal counsel told him this is legal. Well, there's a difference between being legal and properly informing the public. It was very reasonable to believe that this was going to be a topic on today's agenda, and it should have been so stated. Second of all, in November, outside counsel suggested that the committee do their homework and better understand the issues involved and come back in December. There really was no substantive discussion in December. I've heard no discussion on structure versus use. I've heard no discussion on nonconformities, whether it's structure or use. And all these play not only into the court case, but also into a future ordinance amendment. Further, the committee has changed its way of operating so that public comment on these proposed ordinance amendments are not allowed when they're discussed prior, under new business prior to the committee. So a lot of the things that the public could bring forward to have help inform you about actual circumstances or suggestions are not allowed. So I go ahead, spend more county taxpayer dollars on more legal advice and send this out to the towns.
Second, I have Douglas Kurtzwile.
Douglas Kurtzwile, 11055W Arrow Road, Hayward, Wisconsin. A couple of real quick things. At the October zoning committee meeting, as I recollect, Mr. Kozlowski made a statement to the effect that Sawyer County is way behind the curve, I think were his words, when it comes to regulating short-term rentals. I'm not sure of the rules that are in place, but what few there may be are not being enforced at all. There is a discussion item on today's agenda to start talking about short-term rentals. I had a conversation with Andy Alvarado last month, and he told me not only is Sawyer County way behind the curve, it's also way behind Rusk County, for crying out loud. And that's an embarrassment. And as we are considering these proposed text amendments to the ordinance today, you're opening up quite a number of properties to be able to rent a second unit without any public scrutiny, without any input from the neighbors. And I just think it might be legal. It's bad policy and it's bad politics. This type of a amendment to the rules that are attempting to be made in the middle of litigation could turn out to be one of those small local molehills upon which dreams of political futures go to die. So I hope everybody's read the text. Apparently that didn't occur before last month's meeting, because when I attempted to discuss the text with Pat Brown several days after the meeting, he began telling me stuff that was not in the text at all. And I really wonder how a committee can approve a text without knowing what's in it. And apparently not even zoning knew what's in it. I think it's time to put the brakes on this and wait till summer at the earliest, and maybe get the potential changes to short-term rentals worked out as well. Thank you.
All right, anyone else wishing to speak during public comments? Anyone in line? Okay, we'll move on then to number 3, rezone applications. We have none.
None for rezones.
Okay, number 4, conditional use applications.
Yes, this is a public hearing in the town of Lenroot, conditional use permit number 23-001. Owner Julius and Lana Cook, part of the northeast one quarter, the southeast one quarter, section 34, township 42 north, range 9 west, parcel 014-942-34-4110 is 1.62 total acres, zoned residential recreational 1. Permit is desired under section 4.26 for an accessory structure across the town road. Size of the building not to exceed 40 by 80 feet. Again, per my staff reports, again, this permit is desired for a pole shed, being an accessory structure across a town road, which is Ewig Road, section is subject to section 4.26 parent 3. The applicant is requesting to build a 40 by 80 accessory structure across the road from where the primary dwelling is located. There have been a few other conditional use permit requests for accessory structures across the town road in this area over the last 5 years, and several more that are pre-existing. The current primary dwelling on the lake side of Ewig Road is currently being remodeled, but the owner is requesting the CUP for a larger pole shed on that same piece of property, but on the non-lakeside portion of the road. Proposed pole shed would not be able to fit on the lakeside portion due to setback requirements. The proposed pole shed be located approximately 425 feet away from the lake, and we would meet all other setback requirements, including impervious surface requirements per the land area. The location of the pole shed and potential driveway access was discussed with the town, as there is an area located nearby that the town uses as a snow dumping area. The town has approved the CUP request, and myself, the administrator, has been on site for setback verification. As per the town request, motion was approved by a vote of 5-0. Gordy Christensen, Town Chair, Michael Banjo, Supervisor, Jack Schuster, Supervisor, Ronald Poppy, Supervisor, Jason Schuster, Supervisor. There were 13 opinion letters that were sent out and none were returned. That is all. Actually, I should mention in my staff report, potential conditions that I listed here. That no habitable area be allowed in the accessory structure, that no commercial use or operation is allowed in that accessory structure, the size not to exceed 40 feet by 80 feet, that all lighting be downward faced lighting, and then must follow all other town, county, state, and federal regulations. That's all.
Okay, need a motion to, Jim?
Yes, I'll go ahead and make a motion to go into public hearing.
So we have a motion by Mr. Buckholz to go into public hearing, second by Mr. Schuman. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are now in public hearing for this conditional use permit. Is the applicant or representative, Mr. or Miss Lana Cook present? Or any representative? Are they online?
Yeah.
Hello, Lana Cook.
Hello,
And
yeah, could you please state your address, and then if you want to just give any updates to the committee or any information that's not in the staff report?
You bet. Lana Cook, and the subject address is 12228 North Egwig. Do you need our primary address or no? Primary,
No, you're out of Somerset, right?
correct.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, perfect. Yes, we'd like to move forward with this. We did try to see if there was any option to do on the dwelling side, but that isn't an option for us. And I think it will actually be, I'm sure the neighbors are excited because then we don't have to have our boat and our boat lift and our snowmobile trailer all on the front side of the property.
Yeah, I noticed there's no opinions, letters returned. Just curious, what is the planned height of this structure?
Our height, we do want to go a little higher so we could have like a game room in there. So I would have to ask my husband, I apologize, whatever we can allow. I think typically you can't exceed past a 2-story height, correct?
35 feet would be the maximum height.
Okay,
Again, one of the conditions that I've outlaid here would be no habitable areas, no bedrooms or sleeping quarters or kitchen facilities.
yeah, that's my only question on what's habitable. Our intent is not to have any that you just mentioned. However, if we're out there and we want to play ping pong, that would be the intent to have within that some type of space for that.
That's all.
Yeah, I think that's allowed. We have another question here from Mr. Schuman.
Yeah, I don't know if this for Lana or Jay, but you plan to have a toilet or some type of facility like that over there?
No, nothing in that nature, more like another space if it's bad weather to play games. Indoor. It rains a lot in Sawyer County.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you, ma'am.
You bet.
Is there anyone present who would like to speak in support of this conditional use permit? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Okay, hearing none, need a motion to come out of public hearing. We have a motion by Ms. Hessel to come out of public hearing, second by Mr. Schuman. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
This is the discussion action for conditional use permit number 23-001. Owner Julius and Lana Cook. Legal description is previously read into record. Permit is desired to section 4.26 parent 3 for an accessory structure across the town road. With potential conditions is listed in the staff report that no habitable area is allowed in the structure. No commercial use or operation is allowed. The size of the proposed accessory structure not to exceed 40 feet by 80 feet. That all lighting be downward faced lighting and must follow all other town, county, state, and federal laws.
Chairman?
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to approve CUP 23-001 with the staff report that Jay just mentioned, 1 through 5 conditions, Also, the findings of fact for approval, 1 through 9.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Schuman, in accordance with the staff report and the conditions listed 1 through 5. Findings of fact 1 through 9, and we have a second by Ms. Hessel. Any further discussion on this?
Question, Chairman. Can you put under the height restriction, or is that just a given?
You could set a different condition for the height. Otherwise, if not listed, it would default to the maximum allowed, which is 35.
All right.
Mhm.
Okay, so no need to amend that. Then.
No, just a question.
Okay, motion by Mr. Schuman, second by Ms. Hessel. Any further discussion? We're going to need a roll call vote on this, please, Kathy.
Stacy Hessel,
Yes.
Jesse Betcher,
Yes.
Tweed Schuman,
Yes.
Ron Buckholz.
Yes.
All in favor.
Chairman, before we move on, I have
Yes.
a question with Dave. Dave, what do we do with these existing structures that are on that road and on the other side?
So some of them have been approved via a conditional use permit, going back about, I want to say 8-ish years now, when that accessory structure across the town road language came into ordinance form. Prior to that, if you had your main property, such as this is one contiguous lot, you could build an accessory structure across the town road with no additional conditional use permit approval. That was later changed, like I said, about 8 years ago. That does require the conditional use permit. So those that are already existing are quote unquote grandfathered in.
Thank you.
Okay, then we'll go on to number 5, new business.
Can I request that we open that door and close this one? I don't need an open door, but can you open that one? Close this one?
I think,
You're back here.
I think that would be allowed because we
Yeah,
have to have.
we still have one door.
No, we just.
Right.
Thank you.
It's all recorded
Yes.
also. You can watch it later.
It's gonna be interesting to see how the tape sounds.
Yeah, and now it's hard for me to hear. All right, so we're moving on to new business. This is for the ordinance amendment for multi-dwelling development and definition of a resort. I've listed with discussion possible action to send to town. So back in December, this committee did make a motion to send at that time that version to the towns. Andy and I said we were going to sit down and just make sure everything looked good before sending it out to the towns. And as we kind of read through how this would be potentially interpreted, I had some interjections to how that current version had read. This multi-dwelling development has been very difficult to try and correct. The current form, the current ordinance that's on the books as of right now is very difficult to interpret, and trying to correct that wording is also very difficult. I know what I want to propose for it, but to get it into a clear and interpretable language is very difficult. So right now, the current ordinance has dwelling multifamily, and it also has multi-dwelling development. Both of those are very similar in the language, but are referenced in different portions of the ordinance when you look at the zone districts for their conditional use permits. The RR1 and RR2 currently allows 1 and 2 family dwellings. Now, when we look at 1 and 2 family dwellings as permitted uses, I've always interpreted that a 2-family dwelling was a duplex or a side-by-side. It was that 2 families were living in 1 dwelling unit. That was my interpretation. I feel like that was the interpretation of probably Bill Chrisman when he first had drafted this language. But when you have that side-by-side or duplex type of structure, you would still need double the minimum requirements, double the minimum width, double the minimum size of a lot.
So Jay, you're talking under one roof.
Correct, as a duplex or a side by side. That right now is as a permitted use within the zoning ordinance. So if someone was to come in and say, I have 150 feet of frontage and I want to put a duplex on that lot, I would say unfortunately, no, you can't, because a duplex is a two-family dwelling, still requires double the minimum widths and double the minimum square footage. Again, minimum widths being 100, if you only had 150 feet, unfortunately, no, you're only allowed a one-family dwelling. Okay, great. Then we further go into, again, current ordinance language with a conditional use permit for a multi-dwelling development. This is the aspects that address the condominium, resort, hotel, motel, or other similar type of development, which in the opinion of the Sawyer County Zoning Committee is the same general scale and character. When you go to the definition of multi-dwelling developments, again, the current version, development regardless of the form of ownership consisting of 3 or more dwelling units. So again, if you had 300 feet of frontage and you had your lot area, you could right now come in for a conditional use permit, say, I want 3 dwelling units out there. I'm going to run it as a resort. Through a conditional use permit, you would have the public hearing process and either be approved or denied that request. If you had 1,000 feet of frontage and you wanted 2 dwelling units on that property, right now, there is no form or avenue you can get 2 dwelling units on one lot. You can do 1, you can do 3 or more, but you can't do 2. And I've always come back to that and say, why would that ever be something that the ordinance doesn't allow? And that's one of the things that I've tried to correct in this. You know, take out the resort aspect, take out the condominium aspect. Right now in current ordinance, you can apply for a cup for 3 or more, and you're permitted for a 1, but there's no avenue for a 2. And that was one of the changes I wanted to make in this proposal, is that it just never made sense to me. And then another one of the cleanups that's similar in RR1 and RR2. They are both the same format of RR1 and RR2. The other difference is in the R1 zone district. That is just the residential zone district. This hasn't necessarily changed as how it's being interpreted, but it has, I guess, tried to be more easily read. Because right now in the R1 zone district, it allows for dwelling multifamily. Dwelling multifamily within the R1 zone district. And let me get to my notes here. So again, you're allowed the 1 and 2 family year-round dwellings. Again, 1 family being your single residential structure, 2 family being a duplex or side by side. You still need double the minimum requirements. But if you go into the dimensional requirements in section 18 of the current zoning ordinance, and you look at the square footages allowed within the R1 zone district, there's a double asterisk. And maybe I can just pull this up and kind of show you real quick. That'll probably be the best route. And this is, I mean, these are the struggles that we deal with this ordinance. And, you know, my intent is trying to clean this stuff up. But right now, if you look at dimensional requirements under the R1 zone district, there's a double asterisk under the with public sewer and without public sewer. If you go to the note section of the double asterisk, minimum for 1 family, add 5,000 square feet for each additional unit over 1, plus any additional area required by applicable Wisconsin admin code A2, which I don't even know what that is, to be honest. But that's where, instead of going to the dimensional requirements, seeing this double asterisk going into the note, I brought it back into the conditional use permit clause under just the R1 zone district. I would imagine the intent of that, and I don't know when that came to fruition or who would, ended up adopting that. Again, I would assume that was Bill Crispin, is that there wanted to be more opportunities allowed for additional dwellings in a strict R1 zone district. We don't have a lot of R1 zone district around any of our lake community. We generally find the R1 zone district outside of more of the urbanized areas, just outside of the city limits or village limits. So I would assume the intent of that was to have additional housing opportunity to be allowed. That's my, ordinance amendments in a nutshell. Ultimately, we did have the definition of resort. We've had discussions throughout the committee over the last, 2 years, as far as the definition of a resort and what this committee, felt the definition of a resort would be, if we should break those items out separately, but at any rate, the current version of how multi-dwelling development is in ordinance form is awful. Is this version that you have in front of you right now the perfect and end all? I don't think so. I think there could be additional work done on it, but I'm struggling getting it there. But if we don't pick this up and make amendments to it, the current version isn't any better. So that's where I'm at on my discussion. You got questions?
We'll go with, Mr. Schuman first, then Ms. Hessel.
Jay, does this version or this red line with all these edits, does that clean up that gap you're talking about between 2 dwellings and 3?
It does. But one of the unintended consequences that was brought to my attention, and I think you may have received the email as well, is potential tax implications. And I have not gone through that process to, vet that. Because I would struggle to think that, okay, if someone was truly to be permitted a conditional use permit for a 3-unit resort, having 350 feet of frontage, I would assume that an assessor can assess that property accordingly. So I don't understand why, if you had 250 feet of frontage and you wanted to apply for a conditional use permit for a 2-unit multi-dwelling development or 2-unit resort, that why was that different, or how would the tax implication be different? We hear about the prime plus 1 on lakeshore lots. So I feel that there's avenues that the assessors can make, but I'm not an assessor by trade.
Ms. Hessel?
But I do want to vet that process, because I don't know if you've read that email that came.
Yes.
And that has some unintended consequences, and that's what we always look for with potential ordinance amendments.
So I think what I would like is still for us to bring it to the towns, because we can discuss this to death, but without the town's opinions. I think this new version is what you're trying to get to the towns to clarify the issue. But until we bring it to the towns, we're talking amongst ourselves instead
Right.
of getting their opinion.
Mr. Buckles?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to postpone this proposed amendment of multi-dwelling until further review with Jay and court counsel or whoever he feels that he needs to take another look at this.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Buckholz to postpone. Any date on that, or just until?
Jay, what would you think you would need?
It's really the vetting aspect of the tax implications, because if there are other avenues that assessors can use for these situations, and they just have to do the legwork, then I don't see what the issue is. If there is real truth to, the prime plus 1 and, loss of taxable value, which ultimately gets spread to other properties, then yeah, we probably should look to see, well, what other aspects or what other changes can be done. I just find it weird that if you had a 3-unit, which is already allowed in current ordinance, if you had a 3-unit resort come through, or a 3-unit multi-dwelling development come through, what's different than a 2-unit multi-dwelling development?
Yeah, well, I understand that, and in this, and looking at this too, I believe that if we sent this out to the town as it is, I don't think it would get a lot of approval. I mean, that's just my opinion on reading this stuff.
And some of the initial conversations I've had as well, I also think that might be possible around it. I don't think it'll get approval from the towns.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, we have a motion on the floor.
Yeah, I'll second that motion for discussion. So, Jay, how long, should we put a timetable on this? How long will it take you to vet this tax?
I think we could bring this back again next month. Now, ultimately, you know, we had the motion to send to the towns and I basically pulled it off. I said, I'm not ready to send this to the towns. I didn't like when Fine Tooth sat down and said, the way I'm interpreting now is different than the way the legal counsel interpreted, and if we're already having difference of
Yeah,
interpretation,
exactly.
that's not an ordinance you want to send out.
Right.
I think we could have another polished, probably version 5 for next month's discussion, and I would keep it on there as discussion, possible action to send to the towns.
Okay, you can add that to my motion, Kathy.
And then I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Buckholz to postpone until some legal review dealing with the tax implications. Postpone till at least next month. And second by Mr. Schuman. Any further discussion?
And I just want to say that, I mean, the reason why it was not published is I didn't feel comfortable sending it to the towns after publication had gone out. So at that point, publication had already gone out. Publication goes out 2.5 weeks ago. So when I wasn't comfortable sending it to the towns, it had already missed publication date. I still wanted to have this discussion today, so it was added under new business. And it's a completely legal way to go about it, and there's no wool being pulled over anyone's eyes.
Completely legal and not immoral or unethical in any way, so no issues with there. In additional comments, I would add that I personally, I don't like postponing stuff, and I agree with Ms. Hessel to get this out to the towns. However, I don't want to send this to the towns as is. I think it needs a little bit further refining and cleaned up. So then when the towns get it, there's not confusion and more discussion and some animosity. So I would prefer to send not perfect, but closer to perfect, version to the town. So there's less ambiguous. So any further discussion? On
Yeah,
this?
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Ms. Hessel too, but still, there's no use sending this out to the town just to get rejected. We want this to be able for the towns to understand it and be able to either approve it or disapprove it.
Right, and that's the challenging part, because even as the current version reads, not even the proposal, the current ordinance that's posted online, it's confusing.
It is.
So it's hard to correct confusions without still having the element of confusion in it. So we're trying to make it, read and interpret easy or easier. And it's been a challenge. So
Ms. Hessel.
So the only thing that I would encourage is that when we do make a motion, that somehow that's cleaned up, because we made a motion to bring it to the towns last month. So I just want to make sure that it's clean going forward, that we, how could we have made sure that when we made a motion to do that last month, that was.
Yeah, so actually, that's a good point. I don't know if Andy's on.
he's not, but his
I just want to make sure we're not violating
partner from his office is.
any, protocol or anything hereby, because the committee did vote to send this to the towns and we did. So
Point of order.
no, sir, you're not allowed to speak at this time.
Carly, are you able to?
Yeah. Hi, guys. This is Kylie Owens. I'm Andy's colleague over here at Atollas Law, so I'm counsel. I had that same consideration. I do think this should maybe be addressed right here. So maybe we can address it right here, right now, since it was brought. So I'm understanding it correctly. It was brought under a motion to send to the towns at last month's committee meeting, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, and then
So
Andy and I sat down via Zoom and we were going to make a couple like minor typos where a definition needed to be capitalized or something like that. And we started talking about, some of the interpretation of the proposals, and he had a different interpretation than I had. And then the light bulb dawned on both of us and said, well, maybe if we're already having differences of interpretation, that we should kind of go back to some of the wording and change it. Now, again, at that point, I didn't feel comfortable sending it to the towns. He didn't feel comfortable sending it to the towns, but we did still have a motion to send it to the towns.
If I can add, I'm pretty sure, and we can check the minutes, the motion was made to send to the towns contingent upon the legal review, though.
That's what I was just going to ask about.
So if that language was in there, contingent upon that legal review, then we should be not in violation of any policy.
Exactly. So let's see, we have the minutes, correct? We
Yeah, they
have
should be
everything.
on here. Let me see if they show into that format. You might have to check tape on that depending on.
Yeah, it doesn't specify in the minute.
Request the version be cleaned up with the highlighting of the proposed changes, clarify that the amendment change has nothing to do with the Kurzweil case. That his case will be held under the other code. So it was during the cleanup with the highlighting of the proposed changes. If you would read that as a contingency, that cleanup of the highlighting changes didn't occur.
Right, because additional considerations arose for tax considerations specifically that we've been discussing, I know. So we can move forward.
Okay, thank you, Kylie.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Buckles, second by Mr. Schuman to postpone. Any further discussion? Let's do a roll call vote, just
Jesse Betcher,
yes.
Tweed Schuman,
Yes.
Stacy Hessel,
Yes.
Ron Buckholz.
Yes.
All in favor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we want to cover 5B?
I do, because this is a whole different. I mean, they're somewhat connected, but they're also somewhat not. It's the nature of the short-term rentals. About 10 years ago, Sawyer County tried to pass an ordinance for short-term rentals. We had a pretty good ordinance in place, proposed ordinance in place. Went through town approval, actually got zoning committee approval, and was going to county board for adoption. And at the 11th hour, the corporation council at that time was hesitant in that the counties could actually enforce said ordinance because he interpreted that state statutes would hold the weight and that the counties couldn't. So at the 11th hour, it was denied and dropped and had sat on the shelf since then. Over time, we've come to the realization that counties can be more restrictive than the state statutes regarding short-term rentals. And now we are behind the 8 ball and playing catch up to try to get back to some form of some type of regulation with short-term rentals. As of right now, if you want to rent out your structure, your permitted dwelling, you need to get a license from the health department. They do an inspection as to verify you have carbon monoxide detectors, smoke detectors, proper ingress and egress, and they count the cubic area of a room or the cubic volume of a room to determine the number of occupants that are allowed within that structure. That is it. There's no consideration for sanitation. There's no consideration for garbage disposal, for noise issues, for visual screening, for parking. And those are some of the aspects that can be regulated by the county. Now to give you an indication of where we're at, we're over 500 short-term rentals that are currently occurring within Sawyer County. If we were to do some type of ordinance amendment, I would be hesitant to have them require some type of public hearing process though, because you're talking about bringing 500 individuals in for a public hearing process where the majority of the complaints are going to be that I saw so-and-so peeing on a bush at 10 p.m. or they shot a firework off at 9:45 or they rode the jet ski too close to my dock. You can envision what you would hear in a public hearing process with short-term rentals. I do think there should be other considerations that need to be made, whether it's, again, screening requirements. The nuisance and noise ordinances are already controlled by the sheriff's department, so I don't know if that's something that needs to be discussed. Sanitation requirements, that's kind of my largest and most biggest concern, is that a lot of these properties are grossly undersized, that they're accommodating 14 individuals and they only have a 2-bedroom sewer system. It could be potentially contaminating groundwater and surface water at that point. So those are some of the aspects that we want to look at. I have been tasked on a state ad hoc committee as part of the Wisconsin County Code Administrators for short-term rentals. And we do have some talking points that I would like to discuss with you as we move forward with potentials of ordinance amendments or ordinance creations for short-term rentals. So unregulated short-term rentals have a various impacts. They are kind of the following. Workforce housing. Several employers are seeking workers and are having a tough time filling those vacancies. Some of this is due to the increased retirements and lack of young people entering the workforce. However, some of the recruitment difficulties is partly due to limited long-term housing rentals on the market because people can make more money operating them as short-term rentals. If workers don't have housing close to the workplace, it will be difficult to fill those vacancies. Affordable housing. Commercial businesses are buying up these affordable homes and converting them into short-term rentals. These entry-level homes and lower-priced properties are vital for younger families and people within the workplace. Long-term rental rates have increased dramatically, partly because of the income potential and operating in a similar use as a short-term rental. Affordable housing is considered 30% of the household income, and in many areas, most of the housing and rental opportunities are not affordable. The infrastructure. Short-term rental properties were built as single-family dwellings, lacking commercial sanitary and building plans. Many of these rentals were built prior to 2005, so the Uniform Dwelling Code does not even apply to them when they're constructed. Short-term rental properties also have accessed or shared driveway roads, easement roads, private roads. Some of these are, limited uses on them, and they may be overburdening some of these easement roads, such as, again, infrastructure to those roads, parking considerations, sanitation considerations. Next bullet and talking point is impact on lodging. Short-term rentals are critical across Wisconsin, whether it's for work, family gatherings, travel, or recreation, but it suffers on the motel, hotel, and resort industry. So there's kind of pros and cons on that aspect. Again, we talked about the availability of properties. The real estate market has been very hot over the last few years, as these properties were only listed a few days and then often sold more than the asking price. This is great for our local economy, realtors, and sellers. As more properties are being converted into short-term rentals, people may be less likely to sell their properties because the properties generate a revenue stream to cover the cost of ownership plus some additional income. Consequently, the number of available properties on the market to purchase or sell will remain low in the upcoming years. Recreation. Wisconsin is very fortunate to have a diverse natural resources and abundance of recreation opportunities. Being good stewards to those resources is vital for the health and quality and recreation that they provide. Often short-term rentals are situated in locations that take advantage of these opportunities, be it lakes, rivers, streams, next to national forests, or even ski trails. The short-term rentals may not have a negative impact on the resources and other recreators if handled appropriately. However, if not regulated, careless renters can increase the risk of those negative impacts. They can also transfer invasive species or other greater erosion concerns at the cost of locals and other users. And then diversity. Everyone says that there is an incorporated city has substantial differences from unincorporated rural areas. One could say there are substantial differences between the regions of Wisconsin from south to north or east to west. Furthermore, there are often significant differences between properties located in the same county or area, waterfront versus non-waterfront, public sewer versus private sewer, public roads versus easement roads, small parcels versus large parcels. These differences can greatly affect the appropriations of the particular land use in the area. For example, short-term rentals near an existing resort would be very similar or compatible uses from the surrounding land use. But to have a short-term rental on one of our more wilderness or quiet lakes may have negative effects and have diversity concerns. And something that needs some long-term planning and development. So there's just some of the talking points as far as, the short-term rentals and kind of the future for Sawyer County. I would be in favor of having some additional regulations and concerns looked at for short-term housing or short-term rentals. But again, at this time, it's just some talking points to this committee.
Mr. Schuman.
Mr. Thurman, totally agree with you, Jake. Absolutely. It's already happening now. It's unregulated. we were moving through with that. I remember I was on
Yeah.
the board back then. And the towns agreed, we need this. It was even a positive budget. Action, so plus we need this. I know a lot of short-term rentals that are way over capacity for their septic system. That's damaging the environment. We need to address it. So if we need a motion to move forward with this, I don't know if we do.
It's
but
for
Jay, I'm
discussion
all in
only.
favor of that.
Yeah, I just have it for discussion because this isn't something that's going to, come out within the next couple months, but maybe by next year we have a working and potential adopted, ordinance for short-term rentals, but really just engaging the room, engaging this committee. If there is something that we would want to move forward on. Because there are pros and cons on both sides of short-term rentals, and I think this committee as well as the general public understands that, but to certain degrees.
Ms. Hustle?
Are they bringing any tax dollars currently to the county?
Short-term rentals?
Right.
Yes, they're having to pay sales tax.
But I thought it was to the state. I didn't think it was to the county.
I'd have to. double check on that.
0.5% of the,
Was that?
0.5% of the.
Can we see the one from 10 years ago? Is that what you're proposing to bring that back?
I haven't looked at that in a
Okay.
while. I would think there'd be some other items that need to be addressed from an ordinance that was proposed 10 years ago. But yeah, I mean, I can bring that back as a starting point.
Thank you.
If I can chime in here, this is Attorney Kylie Owens again.
Yes.
So, assuming you guys want to move forward with something, obviously we've been looking into this. We've seen different towns and counties doing a lot of different things in this area. There's been some significant changes in the law since the prior proposed ordinance that you guys are talking about. So, I mean, we're fine. We can look at that and kind of use that as a starting point. But assuming you guys want to move forward, you guys could always, authorize us as legal counsel to work, closely with Jay to kind of come up with some ideas about, hitting all of the things that you guys want to address and having it be specific to Sawyer County. Because every county is a little bit different in what they want out of this. So that's just a suggestion from me.
Okay, perfect. So I think, I think that short-term rentals are important and they're becoming increasingly more important for all the reasons Jay listed, but they also need to be regulated and so they're not damaging, the environment, as Mr. Schuman pointed out. So yeah, you said it's going to take a few months. So do we need to have this on the agenda for next month or is that too?
Yeah, I think we can have it on the agenda for next month. I think it would just be still as, discussion, if we want to have some type of. I don't know if I'll be able to have time to get an actual proposed ordinance together within that time, but at least discussion, because I think, some of the biggest discussion points, at least from what I've initially seen on this, is do you want to require additional public hearing approvals for short-term rentals? That's either as a special use or as a conditional use. Again, you're talking 500 of those to potentially come through zoning committee for approval, where again, the majority of the concerns and comments you're going to hear are those bad apples, and they had a bad experience of a renter that, again, was too loud or inappropriate behavior or intoxicated late at night. You're going to hear those individuals speak about that. So that's my only pumping the brakes on those cases to come through as a true public hearing process.
I know not Jay, or excuse me, Mr. Chairman, but Jay, I agree with you on that because a lot of that was brought up during when we were going through all that short-term rental stuff about what you were saying there, these nitpickings and who was going to enforce it, right?
Yeah.
That was the next thing.
Well, law enforcement, they
Yeah,
have the.
right.
For nuisance and intoxication and inappropriate behavior, but if they're renting over their permitted number of occupants, sanitation concerns, so there's a bunch of different jurisdictions, a bunch of different entities that have concerns here or would have regulations.
Chairman, I remember Health and Human Services was gonna be tagged with that.
And they are right now. They have the licensing credentials for the ones that are out there right now.
But that doesn't cover sanitation of what Mr. Schuman's asking.
It doesn't at this point, no.
So it's
They look to see that they have a valid sanitary permit and a valid sewer system. but they're not looking at it as from a sizing aspect, that you have a two-bedroom system. A two-bedroom system only accounts and is supposed to be for 4 individuals. And they're proposing that it sleeps 12. Those are the sanitation concerns, and that's something that would fall back under zoning and conservation's department for the regulations, working in conjunction with the health department. So it's gonna be multi-departments cooperation on this.
So can I propose not bringing it back for discussion each month until we have something concrete to look at? Because otherwise we just will hypotheticalize everything to death. So it'd be nice just to have something more concrete instead of
Yeah.
this discussion.
Yeah, and some of the discussions that we've had, at least on the ad hoc committee, a lot of counties were hoping that the state was going to come down with legislation. There's a statewide, this is state statutes, this is what you're allowed to do for short-term rentals. Well, we've been holding our breath until we turn blue on that, because there's a very large lobbying group in Madison known as the Realtors Lobbying Group that doesn't want to see regulations on short-term rentals, because those are quick turnovers and quick dollars for realtors. I don't know all, and I shouldn't say all realtors feel that same type of mentality. But at least that's the position right now in Madison as to why state legislation isn't being adopted on short-term rentals.
But we can
I
only
hear
control-
what you're saying,
Sorry.
and I mean, I kind of agree. Jay even said it won't be, he won't have anything for a couple months. At the same time, though, this needs a more discussion, so I don't think there's anything wrong with just having it on the agenda. And if you, for discussion only, and then if you decide, hey, there's nothing new to discuss, then you can move on, but there might be some new things that come up, and I don't think it's a waste of time to talk about this, because I think it is important, it's gonna become more important. Mr. Schuman?
I agree. And I think that the elected officials should have input, because we represent the public.
You do, yeah.
We need to make those decisions and help you with your progress in this.
It looks like Andy Alvarado just raised his hand too. Andy?
Yeah, I just want, I think this is a good discussion, and I've talked to Jay a little bit in public health, and I've taken in some public comment in regards to this. I think one thing for the committee maybe to discuss at some point is the approach, if you're going to look at this, is if you want to, there's a lot of stakeholders involved in this discussion. And if you want to take it to a ad hoc committee again and involve those stakeholders, or how you want to involve them, or do you want to keep it within just a committee discussion?
I think it's a very early stage right now. If this committee is on the same, I guess, position that I am, that is, we should have some additional regulation in place in the form of an ordinance. Maybe that ad hoc is then formed to draft and create said ordinance. But again, I think we're in a very early infant stage, and just want to have these discussion points as we kind of move forward. I think, having these discussions at least informs the stakeholders that it's being discussed before it straight goes to an ad hoc and closed off and ordinances are adopted.
I agree.
Okay.
Because there's going to be existing, commercial rental companies out there that probably want input as well. Now, whether they should have a seat at that table or not, but that is another individual or avenue that you should look at, because there is good revenue for those individuals out there too.
Okay, any further discussion right now
What's
on
that?
short-term rentals?
No, thank you.
If not, item 5C, any new business that may come before the committee?
I had a chart to show, but it doesn't look like it came through my email because my internet's gonna be installed. So no, not this month.
No new business, any future agenda items? All right, then, we are adjourned.